Let's get started. All right. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the Meros monetary call. This is our first um, community call on the topic of monetary policy. I am Cryptosi. I am joined by a bunch of people from the uh, Meros community. So thank you all for joining, namely I guess Kayaba as the lead developer. I won't go through all the names of everybody who's joined because it will take too long. Okay, right. So today's call is about the emission curve, but as it's the first call that we've ever had, I thought it would be prudent for us to go over a few general housekeeping rules. So I'm just going to read them out real quickly, try and get through them quickly so we can get onto the good stuff. Okay, so basically, the I've said communications guidelines are just so that we can just be muted whilst we're not speaking. I can tell everybody is doing that, so you're all fantastic human beings. Thank you very much. If you want to ask a question, I'm going to try to um, lead to questions after everybody has spoken. Anyone who's responded to something, then we'll try to open it up, and if someone else has got a point, they can make it. If you don't feel confident in speaking, or for some reason you can't speak, maybe you're in somewhere noisy or you just don't want to speak, some people prefer to text, just type. We've got a channel called the Emission Curve text channel, which has been nicely created by Kayaba. I'm trying to read the messages as they get typed. Kayaba's just being Kayaba like. Okay, so yeah, so you can just type your question in that particular channel, and we will get around to it um, as soon as possible. We're anticipating this call is going to be over an hour long. I'm going to say probably an hour and a half. I put down an hour just because I know generally these things run over. It might be as long as 2 hours, but we'll keep going until we feel like it's run its course. This will be published to YouTube, possibly to Spotify as audio only. I think that would be nice. I wanted to publish it to some other decentralized platforms, but basically I'm just letting you know that if you do speak, you are being recorded, like we are being recorded. We are going to publish this. It's just for educational purposes only. We're not trying to get KYC on anybody. Next point of call is apologies for absences. There's nobody absent who should have been here, as far as I know. If
Well, there were a few people who chimed in on the Emission Curve channel previously who I would have liked to have here.
Okay, have you got their names? You know who they are, so we could.
I did actually ping everyone who participated who had yet to join the voice. Nakashu, Zit, Lunch Money Harvester, Giaki. Giaki, I think, actually said he was going to try to make it. Varin, and a Bossum Advocate.
Okay.
Where I was really looking, to be honest, I was really looking forward to Nakashu, Giaki, and Varin participating.
Yes, so was I. Okay, well, let's apologize on their behalf. Hopefully, they'll hear the recording and they can follow up within the text channels. So, if you do want to follow up on anything that you do hear within this recording, this chat, you can go to the Meros Discord, which is now at discord.meros.org, I believe. Is that right, Kayaba?
First of all, Meros, not Meros.
Yes.
Second of all, no, that is incredibly inaccurate. Discord.meroscrypto.io.
Sorry, yes.
I,
Discord.meros.crypto.io.
I didn't realize. I'm not even sure if we have Meros.org. I might have. I bought like a lot of domains over the past few weeks, but I'm not sure I got Meros.org. It may not have been available.
I don't know. I work with a lot of projects. Well, just give me a break, will you?
But
Right. So
but you're
finally,
only focusing on this one right now, Cryptosi.
I am. This is my
But yeah.
life now. This is my life. Finally, remember this call is just to foster ideas, right? So the ban is not
Other
that we're
note,
going to reach the end goal during this call.
Meros.org is explicitly not our domain. No one in the Meros community.
Meros.crypto. I will put a link in the description for sure.
Do I have Meros.crypto? I think so.
We'll get onto that. Okay, right. So let's get started then.
But to be clear, it's meroscrypto.io.
Yes, and I'll put the link in the description. So yes,
right, thank you.
Discord.meroscrypto.io. Link is in the description. You can click it. The link is always in the description. It's in every single episode we've ever done. Okay, so let's, I guess, start with an overview. I'll tell you how we'll do this. I'm just going to ask you, Kaiba. You can give me an answer, and then we'll open it up to the floor, and people can add their thoughts on the question. So, why is the emission curve important? No, first of all, let's start at the very basics for people who maybe are just tuning in. What is the emission curve, Kaya?
So to be clear, this call really, just to establish this for everyone here, this call really is more of discussion about what emission curve we're choosing because it's an active topic of debate. It isn't just questions to me like our state of our projects. This isn't some live recording. But yes, to establish this, what this call is for is to discuss the emission curve, which is how Meros is distributed over the course of its lifetime. And Meros does plan to regularly upgrade with various technical improvements. I don't plan to stagnate the same way Bitcoin has. So 6 months from now, if we needed to, we could always change it. But that doesn't mean we should be flippant or short-sighted. So we are trying to discuss a curve that we would be happy with for years into the future.
Okay.
One that controls the block reward distribution,
and
so on.
And on that point, does anybody have any discrepancies with what Kai has just said? Anybody have a different take on it? Does anybody feel that the emission curve is something else, basically, or are we all kind of unanimous on that decision, on that understanding of what it is, that definition, I should say?
I do have one comment,
Go ahead.
if you don't mind.
Yep.
Hi, this is Rock'em Sock'em Jesus. I'm not sure if this is what you intended to say or if I'm misunderstanding, but are you intending on revisiting the emission curve once it's already been decided on, or is this something that you're going to cement and not change during the life of the project?
It's something we're technically able to because Meros can hard fork, and we're already planning hard forks for technological improvements. But it's something that we should not expect to.
Okay, I would highly stress not looking to touch that ever.
No, we explicitly should not. I'm just saying.
Okay.
I was trying to note that in a worst case scenario we could, but that is not an excuse to be flippant, as I was saying, and so on.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so
yes, Meros will have a tail. So Ryzen just asked in the text channel, is Meros going to have a tail emission like Monero? Yes, it explicitly will.
Okay, so this was one of the points that I really enjoyed, which Rock'em Sock'em had made before. As I understand it, with monetary policy, it's kind of like, I guess it's the role of people in charge of that monetary policy to change the emission rate, depending on the situation. So if Meros was in a situation ever where we felt like we needed to change the emission rate, could we change the emission rate? And if we shouldn't, why shouldn't we? Because there may come a time when we decide that we would want to, and if there is, like, what sorts of times would that be? That's the kind of way of thinking I'm on. I'm kind of on the wavelength of, is it a good idea to make a decision for the rest of eternity before the project has even started? Like, we don't know what situation will be in a year or two or 5 or 6.
So technically what we can, if we change it, that admits we're wrong, which is something of too, I'm not going to be too hissy about that. It's like, oh no, we were wrong. That happens. The problem is that one, if we accept that we can change it or even plan to, that's just cutting us slack to create a bad emission curve instead of the best one we can. And beyond that, when we're discussing creating a cryptocurrency, emphasis on the currency there, when we discuss creating such a project, the monetary policy is arguably at the core of it. I'm someone who always likes to focus on the tech, the features, and so on, but the monetary policy is still extremely important to users and investors. So if we're saying we're willing to change such core aspects that changes the entire valuation of the project from an economics perspective, that will quickly turn people away. It's really not something we can be flippant about. It's something we could only do in times of crisis. And if it gets to a point where it's a time of crisis, then that's saying we really messed up, which would not be good. Not admitting that we really messed up. No, we should always admit when we messed up, but the fact that we didn't give it the proper consideration to make the best project we could.
So it's assumed that at this point, before the project is launched, that we're going to know, or we're expected to know and to decide upon the best emission curve, regardless of what happens in the world around us. It's just we can choose the best emission curve or we can't. That's the part that I don't quite get that part. I don't quite understand why we have to choose now and how we can be wrong or right when we don't know what the future will hold.
Right, so that's what we're doing. We're picking the best emission curve that's the least likely to have problems leading into the future. Because we're planning on using this for life, even if we technically can recover from it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any views on the aspect of changing the emission curve in the future, whether we should or we shouldn't? If it's something that's just a stone no from the get-go, and if not, does anybody have another explanation as to why, or another opinion as to why? I know it's rising his typing. I'd really like to know what Rock'em Sock'em Jesus thinks about it, because he's he's more experienced about it than me. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. In my opinion, that once you determine a monetary policy, it shouldn't be changed, even if it means starting over from scratch. I know that's a rather stone cold opinion there, but if you start changing things, even if it's only changing things once, it alters the kind of vision that people have that these currencies are cemented in their ways. And if you can just change it willy-nilly, then there's always going to be that question in the back of somebody's mind, like, well, what if they decide to start minting a bunch in the future? Or, what if my currency that I've been holding and saving in suddenly is worth less because the developers or anybody who releases a hard fork at some point decides that, hey, this should be, we should actually have this much coins in existence. So it's really shooting yourself in the foot, in my opinion. And on that note, I really don't think the emission curves matters too much, so long as you're able to meet the specific objectives that you have for it. So, rewarding people who want to hold, not having too much inflation compared to other coins, otherwise, people aren't going to hold your coin. And then still incentivizing further security of the network.
Okay, we've just had a little bit of text, which I'm going to read from Ryzen. Well, Strontium's already said it's Meros crypto. Strontium's real fast with those memes. If you're listening to just on audio, you might want to check out the video, because Strontium's a funny guy. Right, okay, so Rise has also said it doesn't sound right in terms of decentralization, which I guess is what Rock'em Sock'em Jesus was also pointing to as well. I would probably agree with that as well. Kayaba, what are your thoughts? Do you feel, I know you've typed something, we'll probably get to that after, but do you feel also that it's probably not right in terms of decentralization if the emission curve can be changed? Because I guess finding a decentralized way to do that is not something that's in Meros as it stands.
Right, so if the explicit monetary policy of Meros was, here's the current monetary policy, yet the community can vote to change it, I would have a very different opinion. But we don't have a decentralized way to change the block reward. And because of that, we're discussing creating an explicit monetary policy and then an implicit one that says, oh yeah, the explicit one doesn't matter. It only matters for X amount of time until we decide to change it. And that's really not a stable system that people say, let me store money in this. Mm-hmm. So because of that, unless we did a decentralized way to change it, we really shouldn't expect the ability to change it. Because while it technically exists, we should be looking at something that lasts for life. And while we could add one, it would take a ton of time. It's not something that's really feasible at this point in development. And beyond that, there isn't secure ways to do it, given that miners historically vote for short-term profits. So miners would just even if you would do it by Meros instead of by merit, which means that, the actual coins going around and not the mining token is used to vote on it, miners still control the dominant amount of Meros, presumably. It turns out they will generally vote to increase the block reward for short-term profit. And depending on how quick the reaction time is, that also creates issues with exchanges, because suddenly the supply is 1, and then the next hour it's 2, and that will really mess up the expectation exchanges have and their order books, which will create larger issues with our community as well, when we can't properly be traded on exchanges due to wildly fluctuating values.
Okay, all right. So I can't see any real objection to that. Does anybody else have any objections to that? That feeling that it's probably a bad idea for us to go with a emission curve, or allow an emission curve to be changed over time or in other times, because it does set a real precedent of uncertainty plus centralization. Does anybody else disagree with that? If you do, feel free to jump in now, or throw something in the text channel. Gosh, you are a polite bunch. Okay, right. So, Strontium is typing. Before I get to that, I'm going to read what Kayaba said. If there was an on-chain way to do it, which explicitly builds it into the chain's monetary policy. Okay, this is just
It's
basically
basically what I said over voice. Yeah. I just repeated what I said. Not exactly, but pretty much.
Yeah, and it does make sense. That's probably one of the reasons why we're doing these calls, so that we can, I guess, air these out and allow people within the community to add their particular expertise, like we've had from Rock'em Sock'em Jesus. Thank you. Strontium is typing. I don't know if I should wait. Strontium, have you not got a mic? I'm sure I heard his voice today.
He has not talked at all today. He does technically have a mic. He just also has a family and a weird sleep schedule, last I checked.
Yeah, I think you can probably hear my son in the background shouting. Okay, so Strontium has just said it's the management of an economy versus the management of a currency. Fiat makes sins to adjust inflation and buying power all the time, and historically always has, all done to control an economy. Okay, yes, I agree. I agree. Okay, all right. So if we move on then, and we say we start to talk about the different types of emission curves.
Can I hop in here, Cryptosi?
Oh yes, go ahead.
Great. So really, we have 3 different things that I personally want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond the curve itself, which just describes the presumably polynomial function, but technically it could be linear function that we use to go from the highest block reward to the lowest block reward, we do first need to set bounds on the highest block reward and the lowest block reward. So in this case, take a look at Bitcoin. The high block reward is 50. The low block reward is 0, because eventually Bitcoin will not have a block reward. And yes, TX fees, but we're excluding that from our conversations just because Meros doesn't have TX fees or anything directly relevant. So now if we look at Monero started with a block reward of 17, and that was its high block reward. And that has been polynomially decreasing on a curve every single block based off the existing total supply. That is decreasing to a value of 3, where 3 is the low block reward. So with Monero, there will always be a block reward of at least 3. And this is what is known as the tail emission, and it is what Ryzen was bringing up earlier. Mm-hmm. So these 2 values are important for 2 distinct reasons. One, the high block reward establishes coin price, basically. So, of course, I'm not saying the coin price will be X, but we can plug this into a formula where if we look at the market cap of the top 100 cryptocurrency, and we say if Meros took its spot at the top 100, it would have X market cap. And depending on the supply, this would be the per coin price. So because of that, the high block reward basically does set the per coin price. At the same time, the low block reward sets the inflation rate. It says 10, 24, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 1 year from now, whatever time we set for the emission curve before it flattens out, that final block reward will be X, and this will always be the inflation rate present in Meros. So with Monero, which a lot of people have brought up saying that we should closely mirror theirs, they have a tail block reward of 3, which is roughly 18% of their high block reward. And it means that, let me pull up the exact, I do forget the exact coin supply rules, because again, inflation is relevant based off the total supply, based on when it triggers tail emission. I will work on pulling that up, but I do kind of want to start this discussion with the high block reward number.
Okay. With the tail block reward or the tail emission as free blocks, we will get the usual question, as projects always do. So there's no supply cap. That means it just continues to go up forever. Now, as I understand it, it does mean it will continue to go up forever. But if it keeps on going up in such a consistent way, the amount that is going up is going to be less and less and less of the total supply, thus having less and less of an impact. Now, what I really wanted to ask you was, are there any other factors that will impact on that increase of supply, or that circulating supply? Seeing as there's no fees, effectively there's nothing to burn Meros, is there? Or is there?
Real quick, I just want to first postulate a correction. The Monero tail block reward, I don't know if it was originally 3 and they changed it or what. Right now, the current block reward is 1.2, but the tail emission that they have is 0.6 every 2 minutes. Oh, okay, that's why my math was wrong. Right, no, it's the fact that Meros has a different block timer. Because they're doing 0.6 Monero per 2-minute block, which is 3 Monero if we're doing over a 10-minute time period. My bad.
Okay. So yeah, so if you try to compare it, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if you compare it directly, it would be 7. 1 second. So they would be 85.3, which is that 18% number I brought up.
Okay. So are there any other things?
No, it is not. I'm sorry. It's 3.5%, not 18. Wow, was I off? 3.5% at the high block reward. I'm sorry, my bad.
Are there any other things that contribute towards the coin supply? Are there any things that burn the?
Not except user voluntarism.
Right. Okay.
So,
okay.
When it comes to the high block reward discussion in per unit price, again, we're not saying $100, $10. We're really just talking about how it's going to be used from a decimal perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One of the markers I see going around, or one that I personally like, is gold, silver, USD, yen. Which means if you look at a gold bar, you expect it to be thousands of dollars. If you look at a silver bar, you expect it to be hundreds. If you're comparing it to USD, you're saying the coin is going to be worth $1 to $10. You know, so if you wanted to buy a coffee, it may be 1 Meros, it may be half a Meros, whatever. And then finally, if we look at yen, yen is interesting just because it doesn't actually have decimal places. I mean, it might. They're just not used if they are. Yeah. I've never looked up if a decimal yen coin technically exists. I have no idea why anyone would say this is worth the metal. This is worth using this metal for. The metal would be worth far more. But right now, 1 yen is worth roughly 1 penny. It's like 103 yen to your dollar. So if you go to Japan and say, hey, I want to buy a coffee, they don't say 100.5 yen. They just say 150 yen. You know, they don't say $1.50. They say there's just no decimals in place. And a lot of people advocate for this for a currency perspective because they claim it's easier just having the single number and no decimals. Mm-hmm. It's not something I'm personally a fan of, but as an American, I've just grown up used to decimals. Mm-hmm. So it could just be my personal views on such an item. I also feel like coins valued between $1 and $10 have a negative public perception attached. And I did somewhat post about this in the Emission Curve channel. Yes, Cryptosi, I do hear you. I'm finishing up my point here. Only Okay, so only 4 stable coins in the top only 4 coins that aren't in the top 20 and or are in the top 20 and are not stable coins are worth less than $5. That said, 3 times as many have that property for 80 out of 100. So really, as you get to a lower market cap, you have an increased amount of coins worth less than $5. So there is a human view where a coin being worth more gives a perception, even though that means nothing with regards to the supply. And then there is the fact that if we actually look at the coins by market cap, that the top coins are predominantly worth in the tens to hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
But of course, that does make it infeasible for currency, because if we go back to the coffee analogy, now you're doing 0.05 of something to pay for a coffee. So, yeah, there's always the discussion, are we focusing on usability as a currency or that market attraction? Because the two are important. You need investors for a currency to be worth something, but you need a currency to be usable for it to be used as one.
Okay, at this point, I want to open it up because I am quite conscious that we're not getting as much vocal interactions as I would like. So, does anybody have any questions or any other points that they'd like to make? I may start picking out names. Let's see if Pedro is available. Pedro, have you got a mic, or are you just making up the numbers? Looks like Pedro's just making up the numbers. Nope, he's typing. Okay, all right, so he doesn't have a mic. Okay, so I guess we've got quite a few people who, for whatever reason, are not speaking. So Kaiba,
I
I
know
guess.
Rock Jesus has a lot of commentary on divisibility, because even if the coin itself is worth $1,000, the second you look at Bitcoin, you have MBTC where it can be worth $1 still. So, Rock'em Sock'em, you want to comment on that?
Sure. I'm not a market psychologist, so take what I have to say in this regard with a grain of salt. But in terms of divisibility, that's obviously the more important thing. The only real issue that I can see is possible error prone if we introduce, or if most transactions require the use of a decimal, then you might get a little bit more errors in that regard, but I really don't think it matters as much as the actual emission curve does, because in the end, appreciation and divisibility are really what matters here.
If we're Rock'em Sock'em, if we're trying to have a currency which I guess is usable, and we don't want to have this 0.005 for a coffee kind of thing, as we have with Bitcoin. How can we judge, or is it possible that we can judge how much the actual project's going to be worth? Because effectively, that's the guess that we're going to have to take. Because if we're out by like multiples of 100, I guess all of a sudden, instead of a coffee costing $5, it ends up costing 0.05. So how do we make that prediction and factor it into our emission curve? I guess I'm generally opening this up to anybody who's got an answer for it.
Well, in my mind, it doesn't really matter too much. If there's only one coin in circulation and people are spending 0.000001 on a cup of coffee, versus if there's 10 billion of these coins in circulation and people are spending one on a cup of coffee, to me, it doesn't make very much of a difference, because the scarcity is going to be the same, assuming the same sort of inflation rate. So then it's really about usability. If the usability is really going to matter that much to people, then we ought to go on the high side and have more coins. The downside of that, of course, is that the valuation per coin is going to be, fractions of a penny or around there. So that's really kind of just something we have to consider when we're making the emission curve.
Okay.
So I
Go ahead.
did kind of do some math on this. If we did a block reward of 100, and assumed that at 1 year the actual average block reward was 90, or sorry, if it was 90, which is a bit high, but if we did a high block reward of 100, average of 90 over the first year, if we broke into the top 300, it would be $15, top 200, $30, top 100, $100, top 50, $370, top 30, $600. So even with a block reward of 100, you do quickly get into the tens and hundreds of dollars number. So we could do an average block reward of 100, 200. For the high block reward, it really depends.
Okay.
I personally like 100 just because it's a round number.
Okay. I've got a question from Clash. How does the shape of the emission curve relate to the scale of the emission curve? I assume that this call would be about figuring out whether the block reward should be 2x 1 or 1 over x.
Oh, I just wanted to get these two numbers out of the way because they're still very important and because they should be simpler avenues of discussion.
Yeah.
Which means, just to get those bullet points crossed off.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, okay. So I guess the two different schools of thought, which are not drastically different, are how important it is to be working with decimal numbers or not. Rock'em Sock'em feels that it doesn't make much difference. People will kind of adjust to whatever's put in front of them. Kaiba, you mentioned that you felt that there's maybe a I don't know, I don't want to say mental, but some sort of barrier to people or incentive for people to have figures that are like the United States dollar.
No, I was saying there's a psychological thing where
That's it,
people want things that
psychological.
appear valuable.
Yes.
If I say, hey, this is a cardboard box worth $100, you want one? Now you're thinking, okay, why is that worth $100? It's a cardboard box. Why is it worth $100? And is it rare? If I have it, will I be special? But now if I say, hey, here's a cardboard box worth $1, you're like, oh, that's a cardboard box. Why do I care? So no, there's a psychological part of humans that want to own expensive things.
Okay.
And you could even look at this with some brands of luxury cars and so on.
Yeah.
This is Zawave. I just wanted to chime in quick. Is this something that could be flexible depending on the rate of adoption? So say, I don't know if this is a direct parallel, but if you had a company with a stock, they do a stock split. Now all of a sudden, all those stocks are then worth a little bit less and it seems more affordable to other people to buy in. But the people that had already established themselves within that company hold the same value.
So this goes back to divisibility in decimals. I was planning just to have 10 decimals, just because it fits. I honestly don't get why Bitcoin used 8. 10 decimals fits just as well in terms of computer science, and 10 is actually round. I like round numbers. But when we're talking about 10 decimals, we could easily go from Meros having 10 decimals to 9 decimals because it's human representation. But we would need to, coordinate that and let everyone know and get community consensus on the new unit, But no, because
actually,
there's a decimal system we can lower or change the default.
Sorry to interrupt. No, Zawave actually has a really interesting side point, and other cryptocurrencies like IOTA have actually done something like this, where the community agrees to use 1,000 of these units together as one. So they have the MyOTA designation, and then they trade in those. And then the idea is once adoption gets to a certain point, then they're going to reduce that down to the singular IOTA. Now that's something you could do that would keep the psychological thing of having each coin be worth a certain amount, if you want to have it in the hundreds of dollars. But then if you get too large, where each coin is tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, then you can self-reduce and say, hey, we're all going to be switching over to this other convention thought.
And for me personally, I have a lot of friends that are not within this crypto space. And when they see Bitcoin's price at $25,000, $40,000, they're less likely to invest because they don't feel like their return on investment will make as much sense, even if it does still multiply 5 or 10 times. So I do think it's something that has to be kind of weighed as things get adopted.
That is kind of why I did bring up in terms of market cap, where this actually sets the price. And with the block reward of 100, if we broke into the top 30 in the first year, which is immensely unlikely, to be honest, just because of corporate funding and all the other large projects out there, even if I have personal opinions about that, that would still put us at $600, which isn't too high, but it is on the higher end. So if we want, we can just say, let's put it at 100 and call it. And then if we wanted to discuss inflation, move on to the tail emission.
Okay, Clash Luke is going. Yep. See you later, Clash Luke. Right. So I guess it wouldn't harm us. I'm going to throw this idea out there as I've just popped into my head. I guess it wouldn't harm us to have varying denominations and have them given different names. I guess in the same way that you have one Bitcoin and then you have Satoshis. So if we decide to use something else, it won't be something that is sprung upon people. It'll be something that is already there. Um, could something like that happen? Would it be too much of a distraction? Because I guess we could just have it. It could just be something that is said. Okay, one is one Meros, one like a tenth of that is called something else. Maybe not a tenth, but maybe every I don't know 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places, every hundredth or every thousandth, we give it a different name. And then when we do get to a stage where we feel like we should be talking in terms of something else, we just talk in terms of something else. Would that become too confusing if we had too many of them? Should we have only a couple? Like Bitcoin only has, I guess it has three, doesn't it? Um, would that be the type of approach that could answer the point that Zawave has brought up?
Uh, sort of. What he's discussing is basically all of Bitcoin moving over to MBTC, which is possible with at our scale. And then something on Kraken. I forget what exactly, but something on Kraken recently increased decimals by like 3 or 4 places, if I recall correctly. And when they did that, they didn't actually change the ticker. Like, they didn't go from IOTA. They just changed the entire default denomination. So that's like Bitcoin becoming MBTC, but still using the Bitcoin symbol when making purchases. So there's 2 different ways to go around that. And they're both feasible. I do think that, yeah, we should just set a value and move on, with my proposed number being 100. Just because if we look at the market cap numbers, it goes anywhere from $10 in the top 300, I think it was, to $600 in the top 30. So it's still obtainable and usable. Yeah.
Okay. Another topic I wanted to discuss, I guess, because we spoke about it. Okay, before we go on to that, let's go with Strontium's question. The closer you can make the coin and its workings to something everyone already understands, fiat, the easier it will be to accept and adopt it. The large figures being intimidating comment is a big deal. 10 is the most comfortable number for people to work with in general. Some cultures differ, mind you, which is a good point. Then there's the intimidation of fractional numbers for many people. Yep. Remember, people in this space now are on the brighter side, so such things aren't as scary. Okay, yeah. Thank you for that input there, Strontium. Does anybody else have any comments that they would like to make on this where to put the decimal point situation?
It's not necessarily where to put the decimals, but what we want the high block reward to be. Because we can put the decimals anywhere, but it truly, again, it puts on the high block reward for what the default unit is working with.
Okay.
1 second, let me pull up my numbers again. 3, okay, 5, 200. So yeah, if we do want to be even closer, wait, no, I did mess up this number. Sorry. Did I? Yes, I did. Okay, if we did 300, then it would be 2,500. If we did a block reward of 300 and we broke into the top 300, each coin would be worth $2.50. If we broke into the top 30, they would each be worth $100. So I feel like 300 is a bit high, because we would be a top 30 coin worth $100, which is kind of unusual.
But
if we go back to human psychology, but it would be usable as a currency, which is great.
That's assuming that the current top 100 stays within the range that the current top 100 is in now by market.
Yes, that is what it says. Yeah, I am working off current market cap valuations.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. We've got to remember that if Bitcoin, but if Bitcoin moves massively, which some people are kind of thinking it will do, then those numbers will probably also move massively. Because I remember when Dash was at 80 million market cap and it was in like 5th place. Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't that long ago. So now I don't think 80 million market cap even gets you into the top 100 now.
Okay, boomer. No, but that is some old crypto history there. I get your point, but I'm not talking about these numbers as if we actually got into that point at a year. I'm just trying to establish reference points,
a starting point,
based off the current system. Right. I don't like 300. It feels like it isn't like a nice number. It's just out there, but neither is 250 or 200. But I do think 300 would be the most usable as a currency because, again, if we broke into the top 300 of the current coins, it would be 2.5. But if we broke into the top 100, it would be or top 30, it would be 100. So that would very nicely maintain usability along that sliding scale.
Okay.
Assuming I didn't mess up my math. Let me confirm that.
Okay.
Well, it does sound like we may want to work with that number of 300.
Well, we don't have to make a decision now, like we said. If we do 300,
that is the point of this call, though.
But we're not supposed to be getting to we're not going to make a decision during this hour and a half. Do you know what I mean? I just
no. During just 2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours. Okay, so can I move on to another topic, or is everybody, or does anybody else want to have a question? Strontium has just said that if we do it at 300, we can start sharing Spartan memes. Just to let you know, I am here for the Spartan memes. So if we do go down that route, I'm all over it. Anybody got any other questions on this particular?
I do quickly want to see if anyone objects to 300 or prefers 100 to 300. I doubt it, but I do want to get a firmer position on this. So does anyone object to 300 or prefer 100?
Strontium is typing. What we could do, I guess, is put it in a channel where we can't type and allow people to thumbs up on a certain amount and thumbs up on the other amount.
I do think this call provides a lot of valuable context. I don't want to get too many chefs in the kitchen here, aka all 800 people of our Discord, even though only a fraction would vote. I do know Strontium and Hort both appreciated 300.
Hort, my initial feeling.
Okay, yeah, but now Hort is going to 100.
But 300.
Hort, the $100 in top 30 is the 300 number.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so which do you prefer, Hort? Which do you prefer?
Right, I'll talk. I don't know why I'm typing. Yeah, yeah, I'd prefer to do the $100. Yes, so 100 top 30. Is my
right. That would be a high block reward of 300.
Right. So good. I'm good with that. Because yeah, I mean, having just what you stated, $100. That's still work. That's still workable and can easily work with that. Most people. So that's our goal. So that's my opinion. Yes.
Awesome. Bitcoin Facile Pedro has said $1,000 and top 10. At what interval do you plan to reduce, by the way? Has that been mentioned already? No, I guess that's what we're going to get onto next.
Yeah, no, that would be the quicker. thinking. 1 second. Yes, next would be the coin curve. Yep.
Yep. Well,
I do have a function in front of me I would like to share. It is one I like. It would need tweaking. I wish Clash Luke was here for this because he would appreciate this. I do think that's a bit steep, don't get me wrong. Especially because that last line we would just truncate because it goes to 0, but rather we would have it hit a minimum value, which we will set at a different time. But I do like the overall line segment.
Okay.
So then the question.
So for those.
So then the question becomes: at what time do we want to set it? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for those of us who haven't got a clue what this picture means, could you explain it to me? Us, them. Could you explain it, please?
It is a polynomial function.
Uh-huh. And what does it mean? Like, what does this line at 1 mean? And what does this line then
1 would be the high block
down?
reward, 0 would be no block reward.
Okay.
But of course, we are setting a minimum block reward. So it basically says for the first third of its timeline, which is not a value we would use, that emission remains almost entirely at 1. So this is saying that we are at the peak emission rate to enable people to join in. I think a lot of people said either 3 or 6 months they wanted such a being close to the peak emission rate to exist. And then after that, it would decline. The image I said actually has a very rapid decline, which is not something I'm in favor of, to be clear. I'd want this to go over a series of years, which is amount we would have to discuss, how many years we want it to last for, before finally flattening out. Where when it flattens out is when we hit tail emission, which is the minimum block reward that we're discussing.
Okay. All right. So this is more or less the shape without the x-axis is probably not as accurate as you would want it to be. You might want to stretch out the middle part. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So we've had some responses. It looks like. Let me go through them. Horta said minimum is 1, in my opinion. Clash Luke has returned 1/x/ABS with X in brackets. Apparently, sign is the best activation function. Surely it's the best emission curve as well.
I'm
right.
pretty sure you're referring to neural networks because these functions also have a correlation with that type of activity.
Okay, all right. So why is 1 incredibly insecure and not viable, Kyla?
It removes most of the incentive to mine. It's literally saying. So again, look with Monero, their minimum block reward is 3.5% of their high block reward, right? With the idea is that as Monero price activity continues, both will remain incentives to mine to the point the network can remain secure. So Monero shows a percentage value of 3.5, which is decently arbitrary, don't get me wrong. Now, 1 out of 300 is not 3.5%, it is 0.33%. It is an incredibly minimal value that removes a lot of the incentive to mine. And Meros does have a counterbalance for this. The functions I'm proposing are not explicitly a function of time. Rather, they're explicitly a function of hash power. So because of that, while we can correlate with time, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we can't build models based on time, and we should build models based on time for these discussions, because if we discuss based off hash power, it just quickly becomes very confusing very fast. But as we discuss these models, it really, if you set the block reward that low, people are not going to express interest in mining. It just won't happen. I legitimately believe that's too low to properly incentivize mining, which means as hash power goes down, the block reward will go back up to re-attract miners, meaning with such a low number, we're likely to never actually achieve tail emission.
Okay, at this point, I wanted to mention something just for the people who weren't or maybe didn't read the emission curve channel discussion that we had. Unfortunately, Nakashu, who was quite vocal in that discussion, isn't here. I am here, though. I was quite vocal as well. But also,
Shoe.
yeah, you were too. Yeah, surprise,
No,
surprise.
no, no. I, that's how you pronounce his name, Nakashu. It's not
Oh, I thought.
Nakashu.
Oh, I thought you said you were
Nakashu.
too.
No, no, no. I mean, I could be wrong. But I'm pretty sure he's
you
Eastern
was
Asian. In the sounds, it's Nakashu.
you were wrong about Giaki. But
How would you
anyway,
pronounce Giaki?
right. So let's stay on point. Let's stay on point, right? So I just wanted to say about the discussion and the points that were made. So we discussed about this incentive to mine, and myself and Hort, I believe it was, had said that we were worried about the effect that whales would have upon the currency if the incentive to mine was too high at the beginning, and it led to people having too much of the total supply early on because they'd gotten too much. I think I have a few illustrations that could help bring what I'm talking across. Okay, right. We're going to get onto Clash Luke's. Clash Luke's. Just explaining. Clash Luke is putting a bunch of memes in here. We'll get to them. So we were discussing that, and it was Rock'em Sock'em Jesus actually who gave a good point, saying that we shouldn't really worry about whales too much as the network matures. These whales are going to exit, and them exiting is actually distributing the coins around the rest of the network. Um, I know I'm not doing that justice. Rock'em Sock'em, do you want to give an explanation of what you said basically in the emission curve channel as to why we shouldn't be so worried about whales?
I mean, that's a pretty good TLDR of it. But yeah, I've been in cryptocurrency for way too long. I should be richer by now. But in the early days, people defined a whale as somebody who had like 10,000 Bitcoin, because that's what it took at the time to affect the market in a wide swing. As we got closer to 2017, all it took was 100 Bitcoin worth of whatever currency. Now you see people, claiming to be or claiming that somebody else is a whale at 10 Bitcoin or less. So my idea is that, we shouldn't really worry so much about whales because the definition of a whale is relative and it will always change. And on that note, there will always be there. There's always going to be a disparity of wealth, whether or not it's deserved or undeserved. And what we should be doing instead is creating a currency that allows people to store the value of their labor in an efficient manner. And that's really where you get holders, and that's how you get your price appreciation. So when we think about something like a tail emission, or our emission curve, and designing it in such a way that has that balance between securing the network and having a way for people to save their money in an efficient way. I think that we might be able to look at elongating the emission curve, and if we elongate the emission curve enough, then you can possibly have what Hort suggested and have a tail emission of 1. Because at that point, we're so far along that we can get away with it, and that's still enough to actually secure the network. Obviously, I haven't ran any sort of math to support this, but if you do shape the emission curve in such a way, it's probably possible.
Thank you. As you went through that, there was a little struggle in the text chat. I won't go through all of it. There's still this discussion about this maths equation, which I don't understand, which Strontium's pointed out. Okay, so with this maths equation that I don't understand, is this the one which is 1 minus x slash a? Do you know what? I'm not even going to bother with this maths. Kayaba, I need you to explain what this. 1 over x is, and it's horrible, and I need you to explain why, so that we
Yeah,
can move on.
no, I just plugged them both into Desmos. No, I don't like the presentation of Desmos in this case because the scale is off. It looks very elongated compared to my original graph, which is what I was trying to communicate. So I do want to clarify now, I'm not necessarily a fan of this representation, but this does still serve to compare the curves. 1 second. It should be noticed that Luke's proposed curve started at 0. And because it started at 0, I added a to transform the curve over. So the blue curve is what I was proposing, except the blue curve in this drawing is very drawn out, as in it's very left to right, you know? I'm not expecting this level of time period. Though I will say, I do like that slope downwards much better. I do like that slope downwards much better, I have to say. 1 second. I'm actually...
So, and the red line, is that...
That's the one he proposed, yep. Yeah, that's the one he proposed.
Rock'em Sock'em Jesus, can you see these 2 lines, or are you not? Are you driving? I think you said you were driving, didn't you? Can you see these 2 lines?
I can actually. I'm home now, so hopefully the audio quality is better.
Yes, well, it was all right before. It was fine before. Do you have any thoughts on these 2 opposing emission curves? One's
Um,
on the slide.
So in terms of like equity, the blue one obviously is going to allow for more people to get in throughout the early life of the cryptocurrency, and it won't, heavily weight the distribution towards early adopters, which is going to be better. I think the blue one is probably going to be healthier over time. If the red one were closer to a linear equation, then that one might be better. If you could elongate that one out a little bit more, that would obviously be great. But as it stands right now, the blue one is probably going to be better at securing the network in the near term.
So the security properties of Meros are worth discussing. Technically of hash rate, not of time. And that is one important thing to note. Another is that when you go to 51% attack Meros, you're not going for 6 blocks. You're actually going for the majority of online merit due to the checkpointing system we have in play. And because you're going for the majority of online merit, that means that you're presumably mining for months. Like, say for the first month, we have 50% of people drop offline. That means 15 days of merit is online. And in order to get 50% of their 15 days, you yourself would need to mine for 15 days straight. Because at that time, it's 15 days to 15 days, and you can get majority. So if you wanted to 51% attack merit 1 month in, when every miner has only half of miners have dropped off and gone offline, you would need to mine 15 days straight to attack the network. So because of that, we do have a very nice security premise in that aspect. In that you need to mine for a much longer time. The X doesn't actually have any time scale. It just represents arbitrary time. Because this is the raw math formula, this isn't plotted over a calendar. Some people in chat were asking for the most recent curve comparison I sent, which is more normalized. Like previously, the red line proposed by Luke went below the y-axis, so I shifted it upwards, so it is still usable by image. And some people were asking what the x was. No, that's just mathematical 1, 2. That's not meaning gears. We could assign any interpretation of value to that.
Is that something we should consider now? What sort of interpretation we should have? When should the curve start dropping? Should it be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? Should we start considering it now? Well, 3 days, 6 days, as Strontium has just said.
So I really do like this blue curve, I have to say. the one I've been sending around, which is 1 over 1 plus exp 1 times x minus 4, where the minus 4 just shifted into the positive range. Because if you look, it does stay at 90% of the emission for a good amount of time, before slowly dropping down all the way to 10%, notably, before really just flattening and ever approaching 0. Because that's the interesting thing about this curve. It never actually hits 0.
Okay, Luke's just said you're doing that on purpose. Don't know, doing what on purpose?
That's literally the formula I plugged in the. How would you like me to? Wait, he's not on the voice channel, so.
Oh, so he can't hear. Oh, no, of course he can't hear us, can he? Rock'em Sock'em Jesus. I want to bring you back in again, please, if you don't.
I am curious what he meant about making the red curve more linear when we were having that discussion. And then there were also discussions about sharkflation and all that.
Yes.
Discussions I am not a fan of for multiple reasons.
I wanted to I wanted to really pin down more what kind of that 90%, the top line, how long you put the function in wrong, he's saying. How long that line, how long that should be. I know we've just put arbitrary numbers in on the x-axis, but what are the pros and cons, if you will, of having that 90% be dragged out over 6 months as opposed to over a year, or as short as 3 months? What would be the pros and cons? How could we best decide upon a length for that type of curve? I'll ask you first, Kyber, and then I'll ask Rock'em Sock'em after, and then I'll open it up to the floor. So if you want to go first, Mr. Kyber. Did you hear the question?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was responding to Luke.
Right. Okay. So the 90%, right? If we was going to have that over a period of 6 months, what would be the pros and cons, as opposed to having it over 6 months or 12 months, or having it as short as 3 months? What would be what kind of behavior would we expect to get, and how does it align with what we want to get or what we need to get for the purposes of a secure network?
All right, I'm sorry. One more time. I promise I'm sorry.
Right. The 90% is over, let's say it's over 6 months, right? What would be the pros and cons of having it over 6 months as opposed to having it over a longer scale of maybe 12 months, or having it over an even shorter scale of maybe 3 months? What would be the pros and cons, and how do they align with the needs of the network and the things that we actually want to achieve?
Right. So the important thing to consider here is merit. When you mine, you don't actually earn Meros. You earn merit, which is used to vote on transactions. This merit lasts for an extended amount of time, and it is considered just as valuable as newer merit, except it dies. And when it dies, it's removed from the pool. So, no, technically we're 73 minutes in, Horde. He just texted about that. So, right now, merit is set to last for a year. I'm not happy with that value. I do plan on changing it to 6 months for a variety of reasons. Not something I feel like discussing here, as they do go on the technical side of things. So when we're discussing that, that means that the network reaches... I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it. The network reaches maximum technical protection against 51% attacks 6 months in. Because it's that point that there's enough merit in the pool that it's very hard to get more of it. Or arguably it's 3 months in, depending on how you look at it. Because 6 months in, the old merit starts down. No, I still think it's 6 months in. Right, so 6 months in is when the network becomes most technically secure.
Sorry, say that again, and you just cut out just at the last bit. 6 months in is when the network becomes most what? Did you say?
6 months in is when the network becomes most technically secure.
Right, okay. Okay, so effectively, you'd want the 90% to stretch beyond the 6 months.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it technically becomes most secure 6 months in. I'm not applying that at all to economics.
Right. Okay. So the question I asked, you want to take that one? Or as you're talking to Luke, I'll ask Rock'em Sock'em Jesus if he's got any thoughts on the length that the 90% period should last for.
So you're saying the length that Meros is credited to each miner, or the merit is credited to each miner, correct?
Yeah. Well, effectively, what I'm saying is the length of time where we've got this higher rate of increasing coin supply. So according to Kaiba's diagram, it looks, well, let's say, because there's no figure on the x-axis. So let's say that's 6 months. What are the differences? What kind of behavioral differences or economic impacts will there be for that period of time to be stretched out over a longer period? So it's not as extreme and focused, as intense.
So there's a few assumptions we have to kind of state before really kind of diving into what the economic effects would be. One would be that over a longer period of time, you have more people participating in the network. If that is the case, then over a longer period of time, you have more people getting in on this ground floor level, essentially. So you'll have a better distribution of coins after that point is finished. But also people will be holding on to the coins and not really using it until this period is done, because many people are going to anticipate this coming reduction in supply or reduction in emission percentage, if you will. So there is a balance to be had. I think 6 months is probably pretty good. That's pretty much the same as, for instance, for the lack of a better example, for the faucet period for Nano. I thought that your question was originally how long should it be before tail emission starts, but yeah, if we're talking about this early plateau, I think 6 months is probably a good middle ground, if you will.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. What I wanted to do was go through each piece as a time. So I was going to do the top part, then the middle part, and then the tail emission, which I guess would go on forever. So what about this next middle part and how steeply the curve drops, how steep the decline is? What would be the differences there, and what kind of impacts do you think they'll have economically?
Well, if it's too quick, then your major issue is going to be people who already have it, and there will be this kind of reduction in new miners who are willing to enter, because all of a sudden you're not one of them who got in early. So you want it to remain profitable over time to continue to mine this and to continue to secure the network. So it shouldn't be too long. If you're going to have, that first 6 months or so to be the plateau period, then I would say you're going to want to go to tail emission no shorter than 3 years.
I believe Monero's number was 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, which stands to reason. So effectively, what we're saying is that period, that 4-year period, is the period of time where you start to lose the whales and increase your distribution. That's, I guess, one of your key distribution times for the long-term viability of the network is during that 4-year period, three years plus, let's say.
Yes, but you'll actually get rid of most of your whales during the parabolic increases in price. So when there's a major bull run that goes parabolic, that's when usually you see a lot of whales liquidate into multiple hundreds of new buyers. So that to me matters more than your emission rate.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to the floor. Thank you for that, by the way, Rock'em Sock'em. I'm going to open it up to the floor. If anybody else has got any comments on that which we just discussed. I do understand it a lot better now, and can see the reasons why, arguments for and against different things. I wanted to go back to uh, the text chat, because we still got discussions ongoing about Clash Luke's formula, which hasn't been shown properly yet. Uh,
No, we just sent around the proper version. It does have a steeper curve than the one I proposed, which is something I'm a bit worried about, but it is good overall. Like, it's workable. It's not, unusable is my
okay, so
point.
so of these ones that are in the text chat now, Kai, but which one is Clash Luke's? Because I can see Strontium's added. I
Strontium
see
and
you've
I
added
said
it.
the same one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're both the same. Okay. Well, this looks like yours. It doesn't look like the roller coaster that you showed the first time round.
Yeah, no, I messed it up. There was a +1 missing from his original formula, and then we got confused when discussing his future formulas.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, this one looks not too dissimilar to yours. Would it be possible for you? Oh, I guess maybe not now, but another two on top of each other again, because I quite like seeing the two lines.
They don't line up with the same formula. I was in this. They're shifted. I couldn't get them to overlap. I forget my. So I can enter them both, but they don't line up in a nice way like my previous graphs did.
Okay.
Which is why I just sent two separate ones to model how one has a much steeper decline.
Okay. I'm going to move on. Oh, Kaiba, you didn't get to. Oh, you did discuss. We did discuss. All right. So what we're looking at, realistically, something around 6 months for the first part of the curve. For the middle part of the curve, we're looking at something around 3 years plus. So between 3 to 5 years, should we say? And then fail.
Yeah, I have two opinions on that. First of all, even discussing 5 years sounds a bit small. I don't want to be that asshole that says, "Oh yeah, Meros is definitely going to be here 100 years from now." Global currency. No, I'm not going to start spouting that propaganda and lies. I can't swear. Dang it. I don't want to start saying that. Though I will say, I do think even 5 years does sound a bit short. So I don't want to be pretentious. I also think 10 years sounds a bit long. But I also just think 5 years is a nice number. So I think 6 months, 5 years with one of these curves, either the one Luke proposed or the one I brought up, would work. Though I do prefer the more gradual decline of mine, because it very much has a lower slope.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that a gradual decline into your tail emission is going to be most beneficial, because you're not going to shock the system and suddenly you're not going to get miners who go offline after you reach tail emission. But just know that there are multiple variables in this. So if you take longer to reach tail emission, then you could theoretically have a lower tail emission. Because if if you're slowing down into that further and further and further, then it won't matter so much, and you are also assuming some price appreciation along the way. But if you only take like 3 years to get there, then having a higher tail emission is probably more beneficial.
So tail emission. So that it does raise the discussion of what we want the low to be. And it does sound like people are agreeing that the curve I originally sent is better due to its more gradual decline. Because Luke's is symmetrical. Don't get me wrong, because it is symmetrical and it does have a gradual decline. It's just the twist part of it has a very steep motion associated with it that mine never has. Yes, it can go to 1, but I'm pretty sure Hort said it can go to 1. Yes, technically, even if it wasn't insecure, it technically still could. I just don't think setting a value. No. Oh my gosh, so many things wrong here. Okay, now he's saying if 1 is $500, then miners will mine. No, that's saying $500 for 10 minutes of intensive compute power. That's.
Maybe he meant $5 million.
But the thing is, it's not just 10 minutes because it's a competition. You can't just have a block reward of 1, even if it's 500. with the block time we have of 10 minutes, it needs to be worth thousands of dollars considering the competition and the fact that you getting a block should only be considered 1/5 to 1/20th of the time, depending on how large of a pool you are.
I think to sorry to interrupt you. I think to best determine what the low should be, since we have all of the other variables at this point, we should calculate exactly. We need to get the supply so that we'll know what the rate of inflation will be once tail emission starts, and then that really should be our determinant on what the tail emission should be.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up now.
Okay, well I won't do that math because I've already proven that math is not my strong point.
Just give me a moment, Cryptosi.
Okay.
You're very ungrateful.
By the way, just so I can say thank you to everybody, we're now an hour and 15 minutes in, and we have gotten a lot further than I had expected in this short call. So thank you very much, guys. Right, I've got a question from Fifth Ace. What is the inflation target at 5 years? And I guess that's what we're considering now. So Hort is saying, so if in 5 years 1 equals 10,000, then 1 is okay.
I'm just being silly, all right?
Yeah, Hort, you're really not contributing. You know, like I have numbers. I'm trying to work with the numbers. Scrolling up is annoying. I have to say.
Yeah, so Fifth Ace is saying, what is the inflation target at 5 years? Whilst I put Hort on a naughty step. We can go on a naughty step now, Hort, and I can come off the naughty step for once. Yeah, so what is the inflation target at 5 years? Kaiba, do you wanna take that one?
Yeah, no, I'm working on this math right now. I need a moment.
Okay. During that time, I'm gonna ask Rock'em Sock'em something. It was another question I had, and it was about halvings versus a gradual decline. Now, I'm going to assume, for the same reasons that we spoke about, that you just mentioned before about the sudden shocks, that a gradual decline would be seen as better than halvings at 1 year intervals during the drop. Would you agree?
That's a great question. Economically, it doesn't matter. It won't matter at all whether or not you have a sudden drop like Bitcoin or if you have a gradual decline like Monero. However, for what we had spoken about previously, with electricity costs and everything, it might be profitable to mine at one moment, and then the next moment it might not be profitable to mine. You do get the same sort of market swings that you get after a halving, though. So it might be unprofitable to mine the week after a halving, and then 3 months later, as scarcity starts to catch up with the market, then it might become profitable to mine again. And that's not really healthy for the security of a network. So if you have the choice, I wouldn't go Bitcoin's route with halvings. I would definitely make it a gradual thing.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so Hort's got Strontium. Well, can you give us Rock'em Sock'em? Can you give us a reason one tail emission is a bad idea?
If you reach tail emission too quickly, and if one, so it's kind of fluid. So if that one turns out to only be like a 0.001% inflation year over year, that might not be enough of an incentive for people to continue to secure the network. That's really what it comes down to, is whether or not at that time the amount that is emitted is enough to really secure it.
So again, these functions are of hash power, not of time, despite the fact we're mapping them to time. So that means if miners walk away, the block reward will automatically go up to re-incentivize miner contribution to retain network security. So the concern here isn't that tail emission will cause the network to not be secured. The concern is that we'll never reach tail emission, and we'll have an uncontrolled inflation rate due to miners hopping in and hopping out due to price action.
Okay, so what are the pros of this one tail emission? Because as far as I can see, it's not, I don't want to say an arbitrary number, but it's why are we what's I'm gonna ask Hort this actually. What is the or do you see any pros for having a tail emission as low as one, Hort? You can speak, or you can do audio if you like. Or is it more of a question? Is it more of just a question rather than a proposal? Are you still here, Hort?
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to know what was your reason for asking about the tail emission being one.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, it's an arbitrary number. That's all. Just something low.
yep,
You know,
as low as
something.
possible. The lower the better kind of thing.
Right, and just what Rock'em Sock'em was talking about. Just that's going to be in not very quick. Post 5 years, in my opinion.
Mhm.
There's no reason to make it like, I don't know, 20. It just seems too high.
Mhm.
So that's just my initial thoughts. I haven't done any numbers, obviously, so
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah,
just
but
throwing it out.
it's definitely a good question because I wanted to understand more about it as well. So thank you
Right.
for
Yeah, it's just trying to figure out what the process is of everyone.
you know. Okay, right. Does anybody else want to Does anybody else want to discuss halvings versus a gradual decline? Just got an input from Rock'em Sock'em, and he explained that it doesn't make that much of a difference away from the psychology. Kaya Bud, is there more? Um, the swings on the Rock'em Sock'em also said that the swings on the amount of people that are mining is also not a good thing. Would you agree with that, Kaya Bud?
Oh, 1 second. I did want to post something here. Just finishing up my description of it. Average of 40.
Okay, at that point, then I will read Strontium's text in the channel. It raises a good point, though. This is from Strontium. What's economically feasible, plus what's going to feel good for onlookers that aren't looking at the math? Yeah. So I guess what Strontium's saying is,
So with the 300 high block reward at the end of. Oh, sorry for interrupting. Sorry.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I'll just finish up quickly, just not to cut Strontium off, but I guess what he's saying is how important is the psychology compared to what's actually happening. So I guess, and that's probably one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this call, is so that we could flesh things out as opposed to going with something a little less harebrained and without the input of people within the community that do have expertise. So I guess what we really want to do is go for what's best for the network. So I don't think the psychology is that high on the list. Having said that, we did hear from both Kayaba and Rock'em Sock'em that you do need the token or the coin to have more value, so that when miners do mine, they are incentivized to do so. So I guess we have to find the balance. Kayaba, you're clear to bring up your next point, which is supported by your text in the group.
Right. So if we have a 3% termination, because I did have to set some percentage value of termination just to calculate the average rate per block as a function of the initial 300 high block reward. I felt 3% was a bit lower than Monero. It could be a bit high, but we're discussing somewhere on the scale of 40 million existing after 5 years. So now if we're discussing inflation rate, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So with Monero, they had a 1 second. I'm pulling up Monero stocks again.
So then what I'd like to suggest now, right, is if we look back at the difference in the crypto market 4 years ago to what we're looking at now, because it's roughly a Bitcoin halving, right? So we're going to be in another cycle. I think in 5 years' time, I think everything is going to be 10 times where it is now, um, as far as values are concerned. So should we take that into consideration now when trying to put a value on these arbitrary number of Meros that are being produced. However,
I need a second again. I'm pulling up Monero for comparison. Sorry.
yeah, see if it was 10 times lower than it is now 5 years ago.
All right, so Monero's scheme, after it hits tail emission, prints 250,000 of coins a year. Technically 262,000. Wait. No, I forgot to scale this. Sorry. I forgot to multiply it because they don't have a... Okay, so Monero proposes producing 158,000 coins per year as tail emission after they've already produced 18 million. So because of that, the increase in supply is... They have a 0.8% inflation rate. That decreases every single year after tail emission is hit. Because, again, so if we're discussing a 0.8% inflation rate, then we would take this number here. Wait, did I mess this up?
No, I think that's right.
I did mess this up. They're not producing. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. 1 second. We would be producing an additional 338,000 coins per year. So with Meros, it's in a year. This isn't exact because years are horrible. Do you know how many days a year is?
You what? Sorry, you cut off again. How many days?
Cryptosi, do you know how many days a year is defined as?
365, the quarter.
0.4.
Exactly, 0.25. 0.25.
Oh yeah, I'm an idiot with math.
And it messes up all this math. Like it doesn't actually mess it up. I'm just saying, like, because of that, it's inaccurate, which isn't something I like. Meros just defines it as 365 in the code. Like, screw this.
Leap years are for losers.
Exactly. All right, great. That if we mirrored Monero's inflation rate, we would have a tail block 436.
Okay, well that's fine. Okay, so all right, and that's low. 436 for a reward is that's
6.436. 6
Sorry?
point.
6.4.
6.
Yeah,
36. The initial 3% number I brought up, the termination value, that would actually be a block reward of 9. So there is a somewhat discrepancy there.
So,
Meaning that there would actually be more coins in existence, so it'd be slightly higher.
So my point just being that even that is low. So even with it that effectively high compared to 1 is still low. So having it all the way down at 1 is kind of overkill, I guess.
Yes, very much.
Right. Okay. That's
There is concerns when the difficulty algorithm backtracks in order to incentivize miners, because while minor fluctuations are expected and are perfectly fine, if there's large retraces, that leaves the concern of the fact that miners are disappearing and reappearing, meaning that Meros is not continuously providing enough value to warrant a stable mining rate, and it will affect block production timing.
okay. Does anybody
So
else
there
go ahead, Kaba.
is reasons that we want to, after 5 years, have the hash rate be so high it is definitively in the tail emission zone.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other points to add, or even questions, or anything else they wanna say? I'm quite happy with where we are. How are you? I'm going to ask Rock'em Sock'em. How are you feeling with the math that Kaiba has presented in the? I don't know if you can see the text channel, but yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can now. In terms of actually calculating the final tail, as long as the inflation is less than a lot of the alternatives for people to save in, so we're talking conventional currencies and many of the other inflation rates of other competing cryptocurrencies that have similar other features and benefits, then we're fine, right? So as long as this is going to still incentivize people to continue to support the network, which, there's kind of that same effect as what's happening in Nano. Even if there isn't a direct incentive, there might still be people who just do it because they want to make sure that their holdings of Meros are still going to be good. Whether or not that's to be seen, we'll see in 5 years, if you will. But I think that this is a good rate of inflation to be targeting to start once we hit tail emission. And we should also note that this rate of inflation will fall and fall and fall as we go further into the tail emission zone.
Yeah, so it kind of it trends towards zero, doesn't it, over time? Although it will never reach zero, it will just keep on going lower and lower and lower as
Exactly.
right. Okay. Um. Um. Just gonna. Kyber's just responding, I guess, to Hort here. High 300 plateau. Oh no, he's just reiterating it. Plateau 90% in 6 months. Tail emission 5 years. Low 6.46 to match Monero inflation. 7.58 to match Monero's low block reward.
Oh, 1% inflation, which is only true for the first year to be clear, because the total supply does change. But 1% inflation for the first year, and then it's 1%, but now it's 101%, would be a block reward of 8. 8. Or a tail emission of 8.
Okay. Right, okay.
I kind of do like using 8 as a number. It's in between Monero inflation and Monero's block reward as a representation of the high block reward, because they have a different curve, so there's a reason those two numbers are distinct. At the same time, 6 is round and a neat product of 300, or factor of 300.
Next thing
I just like nice numbers.
Next thing I wanted to say was, is it possible that we can audit
Real quick,
decision?
I suggested 10 to keep it easy. I do think that's a nice block reward, but that's almost double the low estimate we're proposing. And it is still lower than one of the numbers I threw out there, but that's not really a viable number because it doesn't take into account the emission curve differences. I do think 10 would be too high. Yeah. I do think we're discussing 6 or 8.
Something we need to keep in mind is that as it stands right now, Bitcoin has a 2.36 inflation rate. And in 5 years, there's going to be another halving. So we need to be aiming so that we're still competing well with something like Bitcoin to save in, even at that point.
I do think the discussion is going to be 6 or 8 here, where 6 is slightly less than narrow 0.07%, or 0.7%, the decimal 0.007, but it's 0.7%. And 6 is a nicer number, but yeah, it does sound like 6 is what we're interested in.
We're going to all go for 6 then, are we? Can I just say 8 then, just to be a hero?
Oh, no, I'm censoring the 8s. We've had 30 different users chime 8 already. I've deleted every single one of their messages.
Okay, right. Last thing, because we've been going for an hour and 33 minutes. I said an hour and 45.
And that's not including the 10 minutes of tomfoolery at the start of the call.
That's not including all the chicanery at the start. No, you're right. All the hijinks, which has not been recorded. So, is it possible for us to audit our decision, or how can we have someone else outside eyes look on the model that we've effectively come up with in an hour and a half, because we're geniuses? How can we get this audited? How can we get this? Audit is probably the wrong word. How can we get this looked at by some other independent eyes, just for I don't know, peace of mind? Is it possible that we can have it audited in some way? I'll ask you first, Kyber. You got any ideas on that?
This is completely not my field.
Audit by Rockham. Yeah, there you go. Rockham, would you like to audit the numbers that you helped put together?
I can probably hand this off to some people who I know here in the Austin area, who are a lot smarter than me, especially when it comes to the math behind this. So that if this does go to shit, then I'm not going to be the only one to blame.
Okay, awesome. All right. So I guess the last thing to do is decide upon who's going to put this into a nice paper. I guess that's Strontium's job. What do you think, Kyber?
Oh, I already made a nice paper of it. I even pinned it in the Discord. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very succinct. It's very succinct.
Yeah, looks like 7 lines.
5.
5. Pardon me.
Mhm.
Okay. Has anybody else got any other points to make? Because if not, I'm going to call time on our call and allow us to continue discussion should we need it within the emission curve channel.
Jokes aside, I did want to say that this can be included in the.
You cut off Kyber.
This can be included in the Meros white paper, the specs and the premise behind it. We don't have to include the entire debate and all the other alternatives we considered, but we can discuss the merits in such a white paper.
Yeah, I think we should. Thank you again, everybody, for turning up and being so helpful. In particular, Rock'em Sock'em, Zawave, and Court, and Ryzen. I'm not going to thank you, Strontium, because all you've done is crack jokes. So yeah, thanks very much, guys, for joining in and doing what doing something that I don't think I've seen done yet in this way. So thank you all very much. Kayaba, thank you for coming. Rock'em Sock'em, Zawave, Strontium, Ryzen, everybody who made it to the end. Also, thank you, Luke Clash, or Clash Luke, whichever way around. And Fifth Ace, yes, also you, sir. Thank you very much, or madam, whichever it may be. So yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop recording now, and I'm gonna post this link to the Discord is in the description. If you've listened to this all the way to the end or watched the video all the way to the end, then yes, you can see that we're all a friendly bunch. So come and jump into the Discord and help us to make something wonderful. Thank you very much. Kayaba, do you want to have the last word? Goodbye?
There is one other thing I just remembered. I take it we're just not doing Sharkflation then? We're not even going to discuss that? I'm happy with that. Don't get me wrong. I just know that you wanted to talk about it. It's the last opportunity.
No, I don't really want to.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Do you know what? I think that because of what we've covered here and the reasoning behind it, and I can't see how we can overlook that we don't need to fight against Wales first and foremost, and secondly, if you gamify it and just kick the can down the road, you just end up with what actually happened to the project that done Sharkflation. So we kind of know how that story goes. So yeah, Sharkflation. What is Sharkflation? Legit no idea. So yeah, if anybody wants to find out about Sharkflation, they can come to the Meros.
Oh, I texted it. I texted an image of it. I think I did a very good image actually.
Yeah. So in short, Sharkflation is an increase in the emission rate and then a decrease.
Right.
So
it says early people don't get incentive. The peak of inflation is like multiple months in, which gives people time to adapt. But at the same time, it removes buying pressure for those first few months. And it has larger implications for us because it actually lowers the value of the first round of the Meros Development Fund, which is based off the block reward. And it is actually specifically based off the first months. I do not like it. A couple others appreciated it. A couple others disliked it.
I feel like for what the objective for Sharkflation was, a plateau in the beginning achieves that much better without introducing adverse incentives.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But will someone still fork the Meros wallet to play the Jaws music on when Jaws music?
I can make Meros Jaws if you like, and we'll just fork it and then have Sharkflation and see how I get on.
No, I just want it whenever you open the wallet to play the Jaws music.
Okay.
You know the music I'm talking about, right?
Obviously, yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm familiar with Jaws.
Oh, I have some friends that aren't. It's like, seriously, like they know of it, but they don't know the music.
So, thank you very much, guys. Kayaba, I'll let you say the last words as it is your dance. So go ahead.
Pretty sure you've been the moderator this whole time. You close it out, Cryptosi. Thanks for helping.
Oh, thank you. I love having the last word. All right, thank you all. Have a good evening, a good day, wherever you are. Be kind to each other and yourselves. Oh, yes. That's a Jerry Springer closing remark. That one's for you, Hawk. Thanks very much.